Hey everyone, this is Phil Garrett with Cranked Up Films, and this is another episode of Filmmaker Spotlight. In this episode, we're talking with John Theissen Jr. He's the writer-director of Ketchup on Waffles, a new feature film coming out through Cranked Up Films and Cranked Up TV. And really excited to have him here. I think this movie is really something different and a real gut punch of a film that you really can't miss. Welcome, John.
Hello, Phil. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so excited to finally show off Ketchup on Waffles on Cranked Up TV. I think it's a really fitting place for it, and yeah, I'm so thrilled. I can't wait.
So you're pretty excited about it, huh?
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah,
been
yeah. So I
it's
am pretty excited. Yeah,
it's been a long time coming. Yeah.
yeah, man.
Yeah. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about the film first and then we'll take a look at the trailer.
Okay, so Ketchup on Waffles is a film that is set in a diner in a college town on like a random weekend night. And three mass assailants show up and cause havoc in the diner. They execute the staff and customers and over like a few hour period, and each killing is more brutal than the last.
Okay, that sounds like a lot of fun. Well, let's take a look at the trailer.
Have you ever tried ketchup on waffles? Just the thought of that may disturb you. It doesn't belong, does it? Sure, you can go on the internet. You can find like a million results of people putting ketchup on their waffles. But I'm sure most of everyone rejects the idea. The idea of it disturbs the comfort.
Wow, that's quite a trailer. There's a lot to unpack there, John. So
Yeah.
we'll get into that. But before we do, why don't you tell us about yourself um, and how you got into filmmaking and kind of like how you got to Ketchup on Waffles.
Yeah, so since I was a little kid, my dad, he introduced me to horror movies. Like I was a big Godzilla fan growing up, and that's kind of where my passion for filmmaking kind of started was from like, horror films and monster films. And I never really saw it as like a possibility to actually be a filmmaker until I took like a film class in high school. And just from there, I started making my own films. And I think as time went on and as, horrible world events kind of transpired, I think my work kind of got a lot darker over the years. And that's kind of what led to Ketchup on Waffles. But yeah, I mean, since I was a little kid, I was always a huge fan of horror films. And I think to make a film that correlates with reality and horror films, I think was very important to me because I've always been in touch with what was going on in the world. And so yeah, and so from that, Ketchup on Waffles was born.
Okay. And you
Yeah,
grew up on Long Island, right?
yeah, I did. Yeah, I'm Long Island born and raised.
Okay. All
In
right.
case you
Okay.
can't hear the accent.
Yeah, yeah. So, did you go to film school or undergrad?
No, right out of high school, I just went straight to film.
Okay.
Because I had a great I had a great film class, and there was other film courses in my high school, which I was very fortunate for, and I had also had a great film teacher, and so I didn't really have a lot of money to afford film school either. So I think like I was like, all right, let me just wing it, and I feel like the more experience I had was the best learning experience I could get. And so just from there, I just kept making my own stuff, and as it went on, I felt myself getting better and better, and learning more with each film I did, each short film I did, or even just watching movies,
Hmm.
really expanding my my film search, and like kind of being bold enough to watch a movie from like a different country, or and just expanding my horizons on film in general, I think really kind of what it really was the best teacher for me. And I feel like that's all I really needed. So I had kind of moments where I'm like, okay, maybe I'll apply to AFI, maybe I'll apply to New York Film Academy. But then I would just be like, you know what, fuck it, I want to do this movie. And so I'll just make the movie, and I'll do the best I can. And I like I said, I would just learn from that.
So, so that's great. So in some ways, you had a really great mentor in the beginning, and
Yeah.
then a lot of you're self-taught in a lot of ways.
Hmm.
But in really analyzing cinema, I'm sure you did a lot of reading. There are a lot of like critical books and critical
Yeah,
writing
of course.
about it. So that's great. I mean, there's no one path. Kevin Smith didn't go
Yeah.
to film school either, so
Hmm.
very good.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
that's kind of how I see Ketchup on Waffles. I always saw Ketchup on Waffles as like my clerks,
Okay.
or something like that. But yeah, yeah, I think watching movies is sometimes the best teacher you could have when it comes to
Hmm.
filmmaking.
Yeah. There's so much to learn.
Mhm.
So Ketchup on Waffles, right? So you finished this movie in what, 24?
So yeah, I wrapped it up. I wrapped up post-production and editing and all that in the summer of 2024.
Hmm.
Um, was it summer? Yeah, summer of 2024. And then it was on the festival circuit for some time. We wrapped up filming actually like 3 years ago, back in September of 2023. So it's been a long time. Yeah, it's been
Hmm.
quite the journey. I spent every night of my life in that diner, it feels like.
Well, as a lot of independent filmmakers that I know or have talked to, it takes a long time when you're doing everything yourself and you're doing everything, with in some cases your own money and me, and a slim budget and all of that. So bravo. I mean, we're almost at 3 years now. So
Yeah,
um
thank you.
I've been there. How over time, like your work got darker as the world and your perception of the world and your observations of the world, where the world became a darker place.
Hmm.
Maybe give us a little bit more about the ideation of Ketchup on Waffles. Like before, when you were making films or you aspired to a certain kind of filmmaking, like what was that? And then how did that flip? Was there a pivotal moment in observing the darkness in the world? Was there some triggering moment?
Yeah, I think social media, and we live in an age of social media. And I think the films that I was making before Ketchup on Waffles, they were a bit sappy, and they were a bit more like dramatic, um, and I'm sure you could find one of those films on YouTube at least, but yeah, there are much more like of coming of age stories, and in the age of social media and like spending most our lives, it feels like, on social media, sometimes we get exposed to really dark stuff. And being young too during that time, because I was 23 when I made Ketchup and Waffles. And, seeing what like my colleagues were influenced by, and like, seeing like this growth of like these like toxic influencers, like, like I don't want to name a few, but there's definitely a few I could name. But it's kind of that kind of, I guess, a culmination of all those things on social media and the news and what's going on in politics and our society. I think and also, of course, world events like mass casualty incidents, especially on, in the United States. I think that's what kind of brought Ketchup on Waffles to life, and then correlating that with misguided youth and seeing, influencers, kind of be like these people that the youth look up to nowadays, these toxic influencers that people like, look up to nowadays. I think it kind of just brought it together.
Mm,
And like there's so much that really birthed Ketchup on Waffles, but I think like over time, like being like an observer and thinking that I could relate to, you know, something darker because
mm,
I live in a darker world now.
mm,
And that's the harsh reality of things. Yeah.
mm. Yeah, it's you definitely see all that in the film, and it's very timely.
Hmm.
The mass casualty events, which has been plaguing us for quite a while now.
Yeah.
There's something different, I think in this century, something has happened. Um,
Hmm.
some really interesting. So some folks who have seen the film have described it to me. I mean, it's a gut punch for everyone. There's journalists who just watched it yesterday, and we had a call after, and he really loved it. But he was like, I haven't seen anything like this in a while. And he sort of described it as a Gen Z film, and he didn't
Yes.
qualify that yet. I'm sure, and you'll be conversing with him, so I'm sure he will
Mhm.
with you. But what are your thoughts, like when someone says, "Well, this is a Gen Z film," or if you described it like that at all, what does that mean to you?
I mean, it means everything because it's made by Gen Z. I'm Gen Z. I'm on the tail end of Gen Z pretty much, but I'm Gen Z. So it means everything, and it shows that like that kind of energy and the youth is present in this film, which is so important to me. I was asked once, would you remake this film if you had a bigger budget? And I would say no. I wouldn't make this film now, you know? I think being at 26, I'm not the same person I was at 23. I was
Hmm.
younger, and who better to make a film about misguided youth than youth itself?
Mhm.
And I think so when somebody says like, I think there was that big tweet that came out after that film festival that it showed at the Golden State Film Festival. It said that it was a Gen Z Clockwork Orange.
Mm.
And so I think, that just means everything, and it shows that people are kind of understanding where I'm coming from here when they bring up like, it's the whole aspect of it being misguided youth and Gen Z. So yeah, I mean, that's great. I love that people, could kind of see that present in the film. And it has that energy, and these mass assailants, the red, the white, and the blue, they are very kind of like they are very Gen Z, and they have that, kind of um energy that you see from Gen Z online a lot of times.
Yeah,
So yeah, yeah, it's great.
it's really interesting that the characters are obviously deplorable.
Mhm.
Their actions are horrific,
Horrible. Yeah.
um, but they also have this mix of a really obviously a really kinetic energy.
Hmm.
Um, but they're also, especially the white, obviously. I keep saying obviously but people haven't seen it yet. Some people, um, but there's a hyper intelligence behind his eyes, and what
Yeah.
he's doing, and the ferocity that comes out of these guys is it's really intense. So,
Yeah.
but I would
It's
say, yeah,
it's rage. Sorry, it's rage. It's rage
yeah,
and mania. And that's something that was also really important. Is that like a lot of times, like, you could tell that the white is very smart, but he is full of rage, and he is very manic. And so like when you see him. in this moment, you could tell that his heart is like racing in this moment, and he's saying things that just aren't even making any sense
Yeah.
at times. But then like when he's like focused, he still sounds insane, but like it is like very calculated what he's saying.
hmm Yeah,
Yeah, so it's a crazy blend.
yeah, it's well, and being the kind of film it is and where it's coming from, like it is hyper violent, but
Mhm.
it's also not gratuitously hyper violent. I think both
Yeah.
in the when you contextualize the violence and even in the way that you depict it, where you choose to be a bit more overt and where you choose to just kind of let the audience's mind fill in the blanks.
This is our camera guy. Hi. Let me see. Nice shoes. Thanks, motherfucker. Hey, good morning. Get me, get me, get me, get me, get me, get me. Look at these legs.
Let's maybe segue into the process of making the film. How long did it take you to write it?
So it took me about, it didn't take me too long to write it, honestly. It took me probably like 3 weeks to from like start to finish. It's only 30 pages. And that just shows you how much improv there is in the film,
Yeah,
because the film itself is like it's like an hour 20 around there. And so, if you don't know, usually you take like a script is like a page per minute.
right.
So to like really get that scale of how much improv there is wild. But yeah, it only took me 3 weeks to write it. It took me longer to kind of figure out who these characters are and what they'll look like. And like what they'll be wearing because it's really the masks are the character names. And so it's like, okay, what are these guys gonna wear? Like, and there was like I had all these like crazy ideas, and then I'm like, there's something just so haunting and very I don't know, like simplistic, but like scarier with just ski masks. And so yeah, there was that whole idea, but like I just said, it kind of just came down to like something that's more simpler
Yeah.
and amateur,
hmm
and just being these colored ski masks.
Yeah. And of course the red, the white,
Yeah.
and the blue. Yeah.
Yep, of
Yeah.
course.
Of course. Well, the cast is stellar. I mean that you feel every moment of tension and fear and heartbreak and grief and shock. Um, can you just if maybe give us some insight into the casting process in general? And there are a couple of pivotal roles in the movie.
Mhm.
There's Ian, the white, and then your female lead too. I mean, everyone in it's phenomenal, but maybe how did you find those? Because those are obviously really critical. They're all critical roles, but those are your leads. So get into that.
Yeah, so with Zarissa was a friend of mine before I even, started casting, but she auditioned. A few friends auditioned.
hmm
The blue was I was so happy that Rob, the blue was my best choice for that character because Rob and I were troublemakers in high school. We get into trouble a lot. And so I needed that energy, and like Rob's energy was so fitting for the blue. With Zarissa, she, like I said, she was a friend of mine, like a few years before I made the film, and I was kind of like thinking about like this idea, and like I had the idea for Ketchup on Waffles, but like I couldn't put it onto paper. So I would tell Zarissa, I'm like, I'm working on something, and she would kind of she would kind of always be like interested in what I was working on this project that I kept telling her about. And so she auditioned for me. And then with Ian was kind of interesting because I had a film at a I had this film Loving Polly at this what was it? It was at this film festival, it was this New York Long Island Film Festival. and it won Best Horror Film, and it won me Best Actor in a Feature. And Ian, as you know, the first award came on, I won. I saw him kind of inching towards me. I didn't know who this kid was. And so I'm like, all right, this kid is like, who is this guy? And so I win the second award. I come back and he's inching closer to me. And I'm like, all right, this guy obviously wants to say something to me. So I turn to him. I'm like, hey, bro, what's happening? And he was just telling me that he saw that I made the horror movie. He really wanted to be in a horror movie. I had no idea who this guy was like prior. He was just this really like tall, kind of lanky guy. And you know, I got his number and he was one of the guys to audition when I posted out now casting. I posted out the first page of the screenplay on my Instagram
Hmm.
and I said now casting. And and so I had a bunch of people hit me up. I had people that were like who were never actors hit me up. Um Ian hits me up. He was one of the people that auditioned. And let me tell you, Ian's audition was unlike anything I've ever seen before. You know, it was it made me scared. It made me scared. And so I'm like, all right, like he did that audition. I have to audition all these other people. A week later, Ian sends me a short film that he made as the character, and it was it was like him cooking his like pasta meal or whatever as the
Oh,
wife.
wow.
And at the end of the short film, he grabs a whole thing of tomato sauce and chugs the whole thing of tomato sauce. And I think on like another podcast that he was on, he said, he was asked to like, oh, how was that drinking the tomato sauce? He was like, I'm Italian, I could do it. It's fine. It's like water. But yeah, he was definitely the most interesting in the casting process. Everyone else I kind of met off of backstage or like they were all Long Island actors, which was great and which was pretty important to me and it felt very authentic to
Hmm.
me that everybody was like a Long Island actor and like there a lot of these people were like first time actors.
Hmm.
Um I know Max who played the Red, that was like his first role.
Hmm.
Ryan, the Hector who plays Ryan, that was his first movie role.
Hmm.
He was I think he was also like in the Marine Corps or something before that. So, it's crazy. And then all the background actors and stuff like that were people that I knew in my own life or like somebody that my buddy Will like brought on from his acting school that he was at. So, I like I had my friends like who played the chef and like one of the waiters be in this movie. So it was kind of a surreal experience. It was a mix of like people who were like professional actors and then
Hmm.
it was a mix of like people of like, kind of the people I used to get in trouble with as a kid,
Right.
like
Right.
so it was like a weird blend, but it did come off as like very authentic, I feel like
Hmm.
when you're watching the film and you feel like these are all kind of like real people in their own lives and which actually makes it tragic um which makes it feel more tragic but yeah, I mean that was pretty much the casting process. It was
Yeah.
kind of hectic but it was fun.
Well, I never, it's, again, it's a different kind of movie.
Mhm.
And at the same time, I never really, I believed everybody, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
that believability that really comes across as authentic, of course, in a heightened situation like that.
yeah,
Um,
that's good to hear. Thank you.
I didn't feel they were faking it, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and that, so it's really, and their commitment was clear.
Holy fuck! Bro! Bro, somebody just shot Gary. He's dead on the floor. That's even worse! Did you do that to my friend? Who are you with? Who are you with? Bang, bang! Holy fuck! Bro! Somebody just shot Gary. He's dead on the floor. Fucking crap! That's even worse! Fuck! Who are you? Who are you? Who are you?
Let's talk about the production of the film. You know, maybe start with how long Here, I'm going to start over.
Okay.
So let's talk about the production of the film. How did you find this location? Because the location is almost like a character all its own, and it's this chamber piece. They're stuck inside this place. It's like a prison for our victims. But you did a lot in there, and I'm curious about how many shooting days and like just take us through tell us that story.
Yeah, so that diner, I've been going to that diner since I was 4 years old. Me and my dad been going to that diner since I was 4 years old. Throughout my childhood, my dad would take me to that diner before school every morning, which was great. It was, so it meant so much that I got this diner. I called up probably like 30 plus diners around Long Island, and most of them were like out of service diners, and I was either, getting hung up on or saying that this was a scam and I was going to sue them, which which was crazy. I had a couple people blow up on me just for asking. Um, so I spoke to this diner owner, and I've known him pretty much my entire life because I've been going there my entire life.
Mhm.
And he was like, your films, like they're kind of violent. Is it going to be violent? Because I don't know if I want to bring that energy in here. And I'm like, you know what, Jerry? Like, I don't think it's as violent as my previous stuff.
Mhm.
Turns out to be my most violent thing I've ever, made. Um, but he came around, and he let me use the diner. And this is an active diner. This is like a diner
Mhm.
that
Yep.
is open every morning at 5 a.m. Like opens
Mhm.
up every morning at 5 a.m. So we had to be out of there every morning while shooting. It was like 4 to 5 days, like every night straight, you know, straight through the week. Uh and we had to be out of there before like 5 a.m. every morning because the diner would open up.
Yeah.
And so it was like we would get there at 11:30, we would start shooting, and then be out of there at 4:30, you know, and spend that whole like last hour cleaning up.
Hmm.
And let me tell you, it was a pain in the ass to spend that last hour cleaning up. There were some scenes that we were so like we were on such a crunch time because we only had those 5 days to shoot it too. Um, and there were some days that we were such on a crunch time that we were shooting the last scenes, and meanwhile on the other side of the diner there was people like my couple production assistants and my makeup artist Danny were cleaning up as I was shooting
Hmm.
and like
Hmm.
wiping the blood off the windows and everything like that. Um, there was one point shooting in that diner where blood got on the ceiling tiles.
Okay.
So blood, the fake blood gets out of the carpet very well.
Hmm.
It gets out of clothing very well, but it doesn't get off the ceiling tiles. So
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, shit. So I'm telling the person who was there for the diner, he had to like babysit us and make sure that, the diner doesn't get destroyed during
Yeah.
shooting. So the babysitter guy, he was telling me, he's like, "Oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It's hardly noticeable." I'm like, I think it's pretty noticeable. There's blood splashed on the ceiling. All it takes is one person to look up."
Right.
And so I'm grabbing a mop, and I'm trying to get the blood out of the ceiling tiles, and it's not working. It's not coming off. And so I'm like, "All right, fuck it, whatever. Just gonna wing it." And so the next day, I get to the diner. Jerry's there. Jerry comes up to me. Jerry, the diner owner. He comes up to me and he goes, so the ceiling tiles. I was like, oh, you saw that? He goes, you were cleaning off the ceiling tile right in front of the security camera. So I was watching you clean off the ceiling tile in front of the camera. He was cool with it. Thankfully, he had extra ceiling tiles in the back. Thank God for that. And so he was able to change the ceiling tiles. But yeah, I mean, I'm so grateful to be able to shoot there. And I think something that's great with that diner too is the layout of that diner. It's almost like a stage, and
Hmm.
it's so open, and like the dining room, like there's so many ways and like so much you could play around with. And like for me, who was a director that really encouraged improv so much, um, encouraged improv excessively sometimes. I think it was just so fitting for this production.
Mhm.
Because a lot of diners they're just back and forth.
Mhm.
This diner was like open, so these guys could really be like showmen to themselves.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. Once you're inside there, it really feels like a kind of like a family restaurant, as much
exactly.
as a diner. Yeah. That's a really funny, great story about the ceiling tile. And you really sort of captured kind of, it sounds like what it was like to be there and the intensity of it. But I was going to ask you, what's the biggest challenge you faced? But it sounds like you really kind of in some way stacked the deck against yourself. Like
Yeah,
you had a limited number of days to shoot there. There's so much in the film and
yeah.
the improvisation and just kind of like this whirlwind of different factors. So, was there one thing that was really the hardest moment or the hardest thing?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think that one thing was the big thing, and it was so it was sort of to be alone, you know? Because I had Danny, I had a couple production assistants, and I had people come on, but I didn't have like a crew behind me,
Right.
And once it was done, then it was me just editing, doing the being the composer for it, and like it was just me kind of alone like throughout the whole like process of making this movie because I was 23 years old and I had this script, and so if I start pitching around the script, I'm like, no one's gonna make this movie.
Hmm.
Like this movie's nuts. It's 30 pages of just chaos, and it's
Hmm.
30 pages of like there's it could be offensive, there's so many things. And I was just like, I think I just gotta wing it, and I gotta, kind of just pocket whatever money I can. And I wouldn't recommend this. I would there's great sites like GoFundMe, Start Me Up for independent filmmakers, and ways you could fund your film. But I wasn't really aware of that. I was too stubborn of that. So I missed meals, and I didn't have a whole lot of money. My budget for this movie came out to be like, I think like somewhere between 10 and 13 grand. And I was just like, I was calling up diners myself. Like, I didn't
Yeah.
have another person calling up diners or anything like that. It was just kind of like a one man show in a lot of ways. Uh, surrounding that diner shoot. Like I said, I'm so grateful to have people like Will, Danny, my production assistants, some of the camera operators and to be fair, everybody who worked on the film behind the camera also was an actor in the film, you know. There was points where I think I play like four different characters in this movie. I play a 911 operator, I play a homeless man, I play the guy in the diner.
Hmm.
Um, I play somebody else. I don't know. I'm like a Where's Waldo kind of person in this movie. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
just being alone was kind of like the hardest part for me, but I kept going.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. Yeah, you have a really memorable role in the film,
Yeah.
and I don't want to say too much about that, but that yeah, yeah. And Willie, and I think your story is we've heard stories like that before. People because they wanted to make the film they wanted to make, they
Yeah.
were the producer, they were the director, they were the editor, and sort of everything across the board. So I would say in that way, it is clearly singularly like your vision for it.
We don't want your money. We don't want your money. However, the red, he took your phones. Okay? So please, no calls, no texts, no X tweets, nothing. While we have our show, all right? So, let the show begin.
How close to your original idea for the film was the final film? Is the final film?
It's pretty close. Originally, like it was so many different ideas. Like I said, like it was kind of like who these masked guys are. I mean, they're always youth, but like who were they in terms of like what they were wearing, what they were saying, like, what
Hmm.
their dynamic was. I think I think the original idea was far bleaker and far
Mm.
more darker, and it didn't really have too much to say in
Hmm.
the sense of like politically and like bringing in this societal and political problems that are present in the film, that are mentioned in the film, or
Hmm.
alluded to in the film. It was more so just like a sadistic robbery.
Mm.
And that's what it was at its core. It was like a really sadistic robbery.
Mm.
And I felt like it could be something so much more. And I think that's where it came to be. And I wanted it to be something that was very important, and very resonant to a lot of people. Um, and I also wanted to feel more claustrophobic, because I think the original idea had like one of the robbers was like in the moment, and he was just like regretting the entire thing in the moment, and it like followed him. And to me, that it didn't hit as hard as like just seeing these like, people who are just doing this because they're nuts,
Hmm.
and they want to do this, and they think it's like for their own like kind of ideals.
Right.
Um So yeah, I always felt like it could have been something more from the start, and I'm glad that it is what it is now, because like I said, like it feels more in tune with what's happening in the world, and feels more in tune with the whole Gen Z culture,
Mm.
and misguided youth, and the themes.
There is an extended sequence in the film that really gets to the heart of what's happening here from the assailant's point of view.
Mhm.
And this is, I think, where the most synthesized um, ideas of what you were saying about society are exposed. It's
Right.
not an exposition dump per se. It's really like an intense acting moment
Yeah.
in the film. So, without giving too much away, how did you go from that really bleak version of the script, where it was this sadistic, takeover, to something that to having that sequence in the film?
Well, I think like, it was important because these characters, they're the way they are, um and who they are, it's very unknown. There's a lot of unknowns to this film, and I keep it that way. It's the unknowns of what they're doing when between those like jump cuts, and it's the unknowns of who they are behind the masks, and who these people are in their lives, other than the fact that they're young. And they're very in touch with what's happening in the world. So to have this like final moment, I feel like is their big finale.
Mhm.
Is like they're okay, like this is where we get the point across. And I don't like, like I said, I don't want to give too much away or what's happening. And it's a very crazy moment, and there's a lot you can interpret from it. But I think like where it goes from this takeover to this moment is their final like, okay, let's leave them with this note. Let's leave them with this understanding. And it's what 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 is being said in this moment is fucking crazy. It's insane.
Yeah,
Like it's not the words of a sane person,
right.
but it is the words of somebody who is more calculated than how they seemed throughout, from what we've seen of them.
Hmm.
Um, and so it was kind of, I would say, to really give you the answer, it's just really that like, okay, let's give them something to understand,
Hmm.
you know?
It feels like sort of a theatrical distillation of a manifesto.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's almost as if the manifesto comes after they do, they carry it out,
Hmm.
and it's okay, like they're confused, they don't understand, they're shocked, they're traumatized.
Right.
Now let's try to make them understand why.
Right.
And I think that's what I think that's what that character wants to do.
Hmm.
And here's the thing about these characters is that I don't have a definitive answer for a lot of who, like, and what these characters want to do, and who they are in their own lives,
Hmm.
because I didn't write this movie to have answers, pretty much.
Hmm.
I had this movie to give demand, to call for a demand,
Hmm.
to call for action. Um, and so I think that's where, that kind of lies in that extended sequence.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Like a little doggy. Hey! Oh, you weak little bitch.
The film, being what it is, I'm sure it's very divisive. I'm sure that will be their fair share of critics out there.
Oh yeah,
How do you feel about that?
great. I love it. I love it. I mean, listen, if I've been saying this from the beginning, if you love this movie, great. If you hate this movie, great. If you think it's just I failed. That's where I failed. If I failed you, if you think this movie is just like,
Yeah.
like it's something that I really want people to have conversations about and have debates about.
Hmm.
It's a film that really demands to be talked about. And so that's what I really want. If somebody is cursing me out online for making this movie, cool. Like, good. I love it. Like, it shows that I made something effective.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And well, I think you have. I'm sure you have.
Thank you.
Keep it together. Keep it fucking together. Hey.
Ketchup and Waffles is coming out with Cranked Up Films. We're distributing the movie. Tell us your version of the story of how we got connected.
Well, so I've been hearing about you guys a lot through Chuck Shaughnessy's Instagram reels and TikToks. He's been reviewing your films. And I throughout, like, the year after the film festival that Ketchup was shown at, I was looking for distribution. I couldn't really find the right fit for it. Um, and then I came across you guys Cranked Up through Chuck's videos and his reviews, and other influencers' reviews. And so I was like, oh, this might be a great fit for Ketchup on Waffles. Um, and so me and you got connected, and I sent you a screener, and from there it launched off. Yeah.
Did you have any, could you talk about your experience of, I think you had talked with some other distributors, but they had some reservations. You want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I mean, there was people that were calling the film nihilistic, and I would
Hmm.
send it. I had me and my makeup artist Danny, who is like my partner in crime with Young Fisherman Films. She was sending out the screener to some distributors, and it was either we're not getting anything back because,
Hmm.
we're young, dumb kids, and we made a film that is super, like I said, like, there was a lot of distributors that were calling it nihilistic. Um, and so I think it was that. It kind of felt like the film was like poison, and it
Hmm.
was like dangerous, and a lot of distributors felt scared to have it with them. I would get like some replies back like, like, this is, I think it's a bit too heavy for us right now. And so fair, I can't say, I wouldn't agree with them if I was in their position, but I'm just so I'm so thrilled that I found you guys because I think I said this to you, Phil. Like Cranked Up Films has like the films I would watch with friends at sleepovers. Like we would dare to watch, something like Serbian film or uh like like whatever, any of those films. And so I was like, okay, like Ketchup on Waffles could be a movie where like it feels like a dare to watch kind of movie. And so it felt like it was the right fit for Cranked Up. And so
Mhm.
yeah, I am so thrilled that it is with you guys.
Well,
Yeah.
I am too. I think
Mhm.
we all are. And this really goes back to from our perspective, real quick. Just these films exist.
Mhm.
So as a business, of course, there's a demand for certain things. And then also all of us here, I mean, our CEO, Scott, started the company as he was a filmmaker, had a
Mhm.
bad distribution experience and thought there's a better way to do this. But that there's a place for films that are challenging.
Yeah.
And there's clearly a demand for it. But we have a lot of films on Cranked Up TV, and we've distributed films through Cranked Up Films that they're really, really good movies, and they need to be out there. So
Mhm.
we're also not afraid of
Yeah.
of alienating possible members or customers or film goers because you mentioned a few films and they're very controversial, but they do exist and
Yeah.
they are films. I think it's part of our ethos to really be independent film focused and be a venue for films that might not otherwise have a place to live. So
Mhm.
yeah, but really, really happy that that worked out.
Yeah, yeah, I'm super grateful that we made it work out
Yeah.
and that Ketchup and Waffles is on here. Like you said, like, this I think Ketchup and Waffles is an important film too. It's a very important film, and like I said before, it's a film that demands to be talked about. And so I think it gives you a lot of credit to take it on. And I'm happy and like I said, thrilled to be with you guys on this journey for Ketchup on Waffles. I'm so glad, and thrilled.
Well, that goes both ways, and I think we've done a lot of work with younger filmmakers. So I think it's important for us too, who are sort of more veterans, to support young filmmakers and taking through the process and that first conversation to seeing the film out there in the world.
And then like one guy came in from one door and the other guy came in from the other.
And then and then and then and then and then and then they shot our waiter and and then and then and then and then and then
After we got connected, thanks so much to Chuck Shaughnessy, your movie guy. Once we decide we're going to work together, you come aboard as a filmmaker. You start to go through the distribution process, and I know that that is very new to a lot of filmmakers because it's clear a lot of folks they know a lot about making movies, but they don't often know as much about the business of film. So could you talk about, from your perspective, as a first-time feature filmmaker, what that process was like for you and what lessons you learned?
Yeah, well, Phil, the interesting thing about it all is I didn't know shit about fuck. So so I didn't know anything, you know? And the business aspect of show business it's a kick in the ass, but it is super important. And I think like with the deliverable process, I would constantly like think, okay, like I gotta get this, I gotta get this, I gotta get this. And then when I would try to search for that stuff, I'm like, I made this film 3 years ago, and I was a 23-year-old filmmaker, that didn't really know much. And, you know, uh, before that, I was making movies on YouTube or being like a PA on like a film set. Like I didn't know what it meant to really be a producer. Um, so it kind of set me on like a quest Um, sometimes it felt like a Safdie film where I'm just like this character running around trying to make things work. But yeah, no, it's something that I've been telling filmmakers, like independent filmmakers in my community and stuff like that. And I've been to some festivals, or I think back in October I was invited to like a showcase for another independent film group, and I was part of a Q&A, and I was telling people there, I was like, listen, like you have to make sure that you have these things ready. You have these things, you know, ready for everything. And I be as thorough as possible. That's what kind of my lesson is through this whole deliverable process. Because if you're not thorough with this stuff and you don't have any of this stuff signed, you're gonna be running around like me, you know, and texting people, "Hey, do you remember me?" Like, you know,
Yeah.
like, and it is tough. But just make sure that you're ready for this stuff. You know, it's one thing making a movie with friends, but to have a movie distributed and be put out there is a whole nother thing. It's a whole
Hmm.
nother animal in itself. And that is that is very it's very important to have all that stuff ready for you, like contracts and agreements and all that. So you know, to all the young filmmakers out there, definitely have that stuff ready for yourself. If you plan on putting this film out there with the distributor and want to make a good buck for your cash with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
man. Just be as thorough as possible. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't do anything. I just walked past, you know.
Shit. It's fucking metal, dude.
No, that's bad. It's not good.
Well, along the way in your journey of becoming a filmmaker, who are the filmmakers and what are the films that have influenced you, whether it's directly in the films you're making and your artistic approach to that, or just inspire you to make films?
Um, you know, I think in terms of in specific filmmakers, it's kind of broad because there's a lot of like ingredients you could see in Ketchup and Waffles that were placed into other films, and I'm not subtle about it too. Like, you know, there's straight up like references and like visual kind of copycat moments, you know,
Hmm.
in Ketchup and Waffles. Like a lot of people say Gaspar Noé, Michael Haneke. I think, you know, like films like Funny Games,
Hmm.
Climax, Irreversible, you know, a lot of those more, or like Benny's Video, like a lot of those kind of like more raw, or a big one would be Gus Van Sant's Elephant was a
Hmm.
big influence to me. But a lot of those films feel very realistic and not very dramatic, um, in the violence of those films. Like there's moments in Elephant where you're following a character throughout the whole movie and then you just see them get killed and then they're done and that's it. Or there's a movie about nuclear war called Threads,
Yeah.
and you're following this one character in the beginning and then the character disappears for the rest of the movie and you don't see him again. Like it's kind of it's the films like that, specifically European um crime thrillers, that were very influential to me. And you know, it's funny because I see a lot of people like bring up films, like there was a few influencers that were like, "Oh, you could see the strong parallels to this film." And it's funny because I had never seen that film. You know, and I think it's just like, and they're talking about like a European crime thriller, and that was kind of like a big thing for Ketchup. My biggest influences though in my own films are definitely like, you know, a lot of grindhouse cinema films, like the films of Trauma, you know, what Lloyd Kaufman did with like Toxic Avenger, or like, you know, that kind of craziness. Like Toxic Avenger has like a scene where like guys go into like a restaurant and hold it up and they're very like kind of crazy characters. So you can see like a lot of influences in grindhouse cinema. You could also see influences in like, more mainstream cinema, more mainstream crime thrillers like Pulp Fiction, of course,
Hmm.
and um like Reservoir Dogs, like the Tarantino stuff. But I think it really stems from, European cinema and particularly 90s independent cinema
Hmm.
and that kind of like expressionism that was coming in, the independent world in the 90s and kind of just like the casualness of like violence in films like Gus Van Sant's Elephant, like I said. Um, because that's something like you may notice in Ketchup too, is that when people get shot, they just kind of fold over or like die. And that's something that was like very important to me, was directing people how to die. And particularly like, telling Ian to like, I would give Ian like a list of films to watch. I was giving Rob, Max a list of films to watch, like based on their own characters too.
Hmm.
And, like I was saying before, like getting back to what I was saying, um, characters just kind of like fall over and die. And like that just shows like the casualness of like, violence. And that's something that you don't really see in a lot of like Hollywood
Yeah.
mainstream films. So yeah, I mean, it's really like the more obscure European cinema and cinema of the 90s. And going to like what I said about like, te like, learning from films, is that's another example of how I learned, from expanding my horizons on film and like looking at other films and stuff like that. Like, I could obviously go on a whole list and say like Bergman, Tarkovsky, this guy,
Sure.
Kurosawa, but like it's really it's very broad, like my influences.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not, I can't really ever say it's like a particularly specific filmmaker.
Right.
But yeah, I don't want to sound pretentious and be like, oh, but I do my own films, like, because that's not the case at all. Like I said, you'll watch Ketchup and Waffles and see direct influences or direct kind of like references to other films.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I think too, there's sometimes there's a difference in influences on your work
Hmm.
and inspiration. So you
Right.
might be inspired by certain filmmakers, like you mentioned, Kurosawa.
Hmm.
Ketchup and Waffles is a very different kind of movie, but it still
Yeah.
inspires you, right? Right. So
Yeah.
since Ketchup and Waffles, since you wrapped the film and it's been out there at some festivals and all of that over the last couple of years, tell us about what have you done in the meantime, filmmaking wise, and then what's coming next?
So I uh I I made a little extended short film called The Punishment Tapes, which is feels like kind of like my which feels almost like my dark experience going through the distribution process. It's a very personal story, so that's something that I'm looking forward for people to see. Um, since Ketchup on Waffles has wrapped, we've made a few short films that are available on YouTube. I Become the Devil, Damn This Is Sad, and The Zombie, and Double Dog Dare the Pitch. Um, so those are available on our YouTube, Young Fisherman Films LLC. But yeah, I mean, right now, in terms of like feature films, I have a few scripts that I want to get out there. I made that short film Double Dog Dare the Pitch. That gained a lot of kind of mixed reviews, and so I went back into the feature length script and made that work, and that's something that I really think that could be my next feature, or another script that I wrote. So I have a bunch of scripts right now that I want to get made into features and films in the future. But be on the lookout for the Punishment Tapes, that extended short film, and of course Ketchup on Waffles. Yeah, that's that. That's what's next. I hope I could get those scripts made, and whatever ideas that come into my head, I can't wait to get out there.